Hello.
How are you?
Good.
You were once a DJ.
Yeah.
How did you become mayor?
Well, it wasn't from DJ to mayor.
DJ.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff in between there, but I took a different path. I mean, I didn't come from a political family.
Yeah.
My parents never had a yard sign in their yard or got involved in politics. Like I said, you know, my grandfather came from Italy with a second grade education. My grandmother never went to school. I mean, my background was a little bit different, but I was always interested. I always loved history. I started reading history books when I was in second grade and just found this really profound love of it. My dad had been a history teacher, so that probably was where part of that came from. I did, you know, student council and that type of stuff in high school, and after college began working on political campaigns, and I was pretty good at it. And so I got hired by a lot of different people. I worked on Capitol Hill for a while. I worked inside the Beltway, but I came back and started my own business running campaigns. And by the time I was 30, I got sick of it. I just didn't like any part of political campaign work. So I took a pay cut of 1/2 and I became the chief of staff to a city councilman. Oh. And for 7 years I did that job. And then he decided he was not going to run for re-election, so I ran. And I won. And I spent 12 years on city council before I won for mayor. And it took me 2.5 times running for mayor before I won that election. So it was a long process. I wasn't the favorite candidate. I was considered a long shot by a lot of folks, including my own friends, but I had a lot of friends. So they got involved and they helped me, and through a lot of perseverance, I was able to finally get my dream job.
What are your views on immigration, as most Pittsburgh people are immigrants?
I was raised with my grandfather, who came here from Italy. And when he came here in 1921, it was during the heyday of the Industrial Revolution. And people came from the southern United States, they came from South Europe, Eastern Europe, in order to use their backs and their arms and to build in mills and factories and mines, building America. But there were people who didn't like the fact that all of these new immigrants were coming, and so they changed the laws in the U.S. Congress so that you had to be here in 1890. If your nationality had a certain percent, you weren't allowed to have more than that, which meant that my grandma couldn't come over for 4.5 years. They were separated because of changes by Congress and the laws, and they were aimed at Catholics. It was very deliberate. In many ways, we haven't changed. We're still a country that targets certain groups by the way that they pray or where they're from. And we tend to create laws that limit the ability of allowing us to fulfill our true destiny, which is to be the one place on earth that is there for anyone and everyone, in order to find a way to get away from persecution, to get away from poverty or famine, in order to be that one place on earth that everyone can look to as the shining light. And there's those that tend to take away that ladder of opportunity, simply not understanding that maybe 100 years ago, they were the ones who were the target.
Who would you say influenced your life the most?
My mom.
Your mom?
Yeah, it's without a doubt. She was the daughter of immigrants. She was the first person born in this country in her family. She raised 4 boys. She had to bury 2 of them. She has been, you know, just a rock of stability and steadiness throughout my entire life, and there's no way that I'd ever been able to have this job without her.
Okay, so you said that your mom was a child of immigrants. Who did you think is like the most important, like base for the future? The parents who are immigrants or the children of immigrants? Who is more important for the future of the United States?
I think that it's a combination. The parents of immigrants value education in the public education system in this country. They will sacrifice everything more so than people who have born here, because they realize that the opportunities they didn't have are there for their children. And I think that the first generation of new Americans understand that sacrifice and have almost like a commitment to succeed because of it. If we could instill that in every family, it would be one of the most valuable assets we could ever deliver to actually see the American dream happen.
Okay, so there's been talk going on about how children of immigrants who are born in the U.S. won't be able to gain natural citizenship
Yep.
through the process. What are your feelings about it?
The moment that a child is born in this country, they are American. That was a guaranteed right of every child, and there shouldn't even need to be a process for citizenship.
You have told, I believe, BBC News about how you would welcome any immigrants that the Trump administration would give Pittsburgh. How many do you estimate that will come here?
I couldn't give you an exact number because a lot of the work that's done through our refugee and immigration community is done through nonprofits, all different types of faith-based organizations, different nonprofits that work on the housing component, on employment and cultural and language issues. And so there's a finite number that we could be able to take in order to be able to provide all those services adequately. But that number's in the several hundreds. We're looking at a city that's the 55th largest city in America when you just look at the city of Pittsburgh and its borders. And we're still able to take in several hundred. Imagine a city like New York, tens of thousands. I mean, if we all did our share, there wouldn't be a crisis. We would all be enriched by having more diverse, culturally enriched communities.
What changes would you want to see in the city of Pittsburgh?
If I had a magic wand?
If you had a magic wand.
If I had a magic wand, well, the Penguins wouldn't have been eliminated. Let me put it that way. That's one thing. And then the second thing would be I would give every child the opportunity, starting at a very, very young age, to have quality education. I believe that if we have universal education before kindergarten, kids then starting kindergarten start out at the same. You have less of a disparity by third grade in reading levels. And the important thing to understand is between kindergarten and third grade, you learn to read. And then after third grade, you read to learn. And if you can't read by third grade, it makes it really hard by the time that you start middle school. And when you're struggling in middle school, there's a likelihood you're not going to graduate high school. So that sets people on two different paths in life. I would use that magic wand and everybody would have that opportunity at 3 years old to start to learn and be getting a quality education.
Do you think that Pittsburgh, like people who are actually born in Pittsburgh and immigrants that come from other country, are going to be able to coexist through education, school? Because I know that there are certain kinds of, I wouldn't say, almost like discrimination based on your race, your gender, your sexuality. What do you think about that? Do you think we should kind of have something like a program going on that helps with it?
So it's interesting to think about the question that you just asked, because it's based on the understanding that there are those that view people differently and don't understand them. And then when they don't understand, instead of using education as a way to learn, they simply fall back to hate. So what is hate? Hate is not knowing. Why would somebody in 10th grade say, I hate algebra? Because they don't get it. Why do some people say, I hate broccoli? Because they don't get it. They don't like it. It doesn't taste right. So why would somebody say they hate somebody because of the way they pray or where they're from in the world or the way they love or any of those other reasons? Because they don't get it. So when you ask if education is important, education is the solution. It's the only way. You can't change somebody's mind unless you are able to change
Yourself.
not only yourself, but change the way that they see something. And so words can't do it. It requires an understanding. And once there is that understanding, things become a lot different. What's tearing us apart is that you can't learn about somebody through social media. And you put up a wall because you're not with them. People act very differently when they're in the same room together, and they're very less likely to extend that hate or that the expressions. But when they find themselves in different parts of the city typing into somewhere, those words flow because there is no connection. And that first connection is being in that same room. The second part is communicating. The third part is being able to understand. And if you're able to understand, then you get to the critical part, which is empathy, being able to fully understand another person.
Anything you would like to tell us?
Did I mention that I'm really disappointed the Penguins got swept?
I don't watch sports. Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So like I woke up this morning and I'm like, what's this sadness I had? Oh, yeah. So and this sort of goes what I like to do for fun. I love hockey. I started playing when I was 7 years old, and I only quit skating about 4 years ago, and I still have my equipment in the basement, so I still have this idea that I'm going to get back on the ice. But I also love watching hockey, and then I love analyzing hockey. And I'll get to the point where I'll be on some blog arguing with like a 12-year-old from Saskatchewan about what the trade value of Phil Kessel is. So, but I tend to spend a lot of my hockey season time of year engaged in that sport. In the summer, I like to get out to the woods, and I have a few different groups of friends that we do annual camping and canoeing trips with, and try to make those as much as possible. And then I just like to chill out. I like to be at my house, in my living room by myself, and online with a phone and a computer and watching 3 movies and a game at the same time.
You sound like a teenager.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just basically our
Yeah.
life summed up, except for school.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, my school's my work, so yeah.
Well,
I think my nieces and nephews would tell you that I am sort of like, yeah, they're in their 20s.
You're like a young spirit in an old person's body. Wait, that sounded so... I didn't mean it like that. I meant it.
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, let's go with that. I was with His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
The what?
The Dalai Lama.
What's that?
He is basically the head of the Buddhist Buddhism, and he is the 14th incarnation of the spirit of the Dalai Lama. So in Buddhism, there's a strong belief in reincarnation,
Yeah.
and that when the Dalai Lama passes, after a certain amount of time, the spirit is brought back through another individual, then they go and look for that individual. So His Holiness is 83, and it was like I was with a teenager. When I went up to introduce, and I was very nervous, and this is in India, and I went to shake his hand, and I was being introduced as the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. He grabbed me by my hair. And yes. And he said, "This is black. This is white." And I'm like, what do I say? You know, it's like, thank you, Your Holiness. It's very observant. It's the way God made me. Shall we now talk about the presence of God? You know, it's like, I didn't know what to say. So, but the fact is that the 45 minutes that I was with him was with a few other people. I really felt that he was such an alive person. and he was laughing, and and then I start realizing, you know, all this stuff that he talks about compassion and everything else, has basically lifted the burdens that we all face off of him. And so it is just a free spirit that is there. And what a wonderful way to be able to live a life. It's very customary in Asia to
Namaste.
yes. And when you're doing it, there's different ways that you can do it based upon who it is that you... But with Buddhist monks, what they'll always do is they'll turn their thumbs in. And by turning the thumbs in, what they're doing is they're wishing you compassion. And so I like that.